My name's the Gentleman, or you can call me Luke 12, and today we're gonna be going back at it again. So last time we finished the Flexbox in a very weird type of way, It kinda sucked. I know, I'm very sorry for trying to split into two parts, but my life is depressing, so yeah. Let's try and make it not so depressing, and let's just try and get this done in one go. Ha ha ha, he. Yeah. So, anyways, today we're going to be learning about CSS Grid. CSS Grid helps you easily build complex web designs. It works by turning HTML into a grid container. Alright, so let's get this party started. I don't know. Let's have some fun and try to change this a little bit like that. Okie dokie. So, turn any HTML element into a grid container by displaying the property as grid. Okay, so let's change the container into a grid by just typing in display grid. And nothing happens. Except for we just let the computer know that we want that to be a grid container. Okie dokie. So this will give your grid two columns that are each 50 pixels wide. The number of parameters given to the grid template column property indicates the number of columns in the grid, and the value of each parameter indicates the width of each column. Give the grid container three columns that are each 100 pixels wide. So let's display. Oh, it's already displayed grid. Alright, so let's do grid template columns that are 100 pixels wide, and how many? Three of them. So 100 pixels for one. Makes one column. Now let's make another one. Makes two columns. And then now we have three columns. Cool, so inside this one container we have 5 divs. These 5 divs are block level elements. So that's why they were stacked on top of each other. But now we've turned this container into a grid, which allowed us to create 3 columns that were 100 pixels each. So that's why there's a whole bunch of space over here. Very cool. Very nice explanation. Oh, thank you. Okie dokie. So add 2 rows to the grid that are 50 pixels by using the. So there's grid columns and then there's grid rows. Grid rows is like this, is horizontal, and columns is vertical. So let's do some grid columns or grid rows. So grid template row. It's gonna be 50 pixels and 50 pixels. And we just made 2 rows, right? Or really? Nothing? Okay, so we just have officially 2 rows that are, what if we made this one, 150? Anything? This one 150? Oh, I have to change it to rows. Okay, there we go. Guys, make sure your spelling is on point. Looks like mine is not so pointy. Ha ha ha, he. Alright, so this snippet creates 5 columns. The first column is as wide as its content. So you can use absolute and relative units like pixels and EM in the CSS grid to define the size of the row and column. You can use these as well. Set the column or row to a fraction of the available space. Auto. Set the column or row to the width or height of its content automatically. And then the percent sign adjusts the column or row to the percent of the width. Oh wait, what? That's okay. I just remember FR is fraction, auto just makes it auto, and then this is the percentage. Wow. So grid template column. So the first one's gonna be auto. The first column is gonna be an auto. Then the second one is 50 pixels. Then it's 10%. Then it's 2 fractions and 1 fractions. So this is the auto. So this is whatever's left over. So this is how I see it. So they made it so it's 2 fractions of the column will be 4. 1 fraction is 5. Then 3 is gonna be 10% of this column. Then they use only 50 pixels of that, and then it's auto. That's pretty much it. So for the grid column, make the grid the widths follow as 1/4. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna just modify the code above this line. So 1 fraction for the first one, for the first column, 100 pixels for the second one, and then 2 fractions for the last column. So we made it so it takes up 1 fraction. So the first column takes up 1 fraction. Then the second column takes up 100 pixels, and then 2 fractions for the last one. Very cool. So far the grids have created the columns that have been tight up against each other. Sometimes you want a gap in between the columns to add a gap between the columns. Use the grid column gap property like this. Grid column gap 10 pixels. This creates 10 pixels of empty space between all of our columns. Give the columns in the grid 10 pixel gap. Okay, so grid column, oh my gosh, column gap is gonna be 20 pixels. So between each column there's gonna be 20 pixels. So nice, and everything is spread out. So create a gap row that's 5 pixels tall. So grid gap row, and then we're gonna make it 5 pixels. Doesn't work. Grid gap rows. Grid row gap. Wow, guys, I'm so sorry. Just read the directions. Grid row gap. There we go. Very cool, very awesome. So now we can use just grid gap as the shorthand, and then it's gonna give, how's it gonna go? The 10 pixel gap will be for rows, the 20, so 10 goes first, so the row goes first, then the column. So if you just make it so it's gonna be grid gap, it's gonna be 10 pixels for the row, and then the second is gonna be for the column. So the first attribute is gonna be for the first attribute is gonna be for rows, the second one is gonna be for columns. For grid gap. Very cool. I'm sorry if you guys can hear some polizia in the background. That's not my problem. It's the bad guys outside. Ha ha ha, he he he. So up to this point, all the properties that have been discussed for a grid container, the grid column property is the first one for use on the grid items themselves. The hypothetical horizontal and vertical line that creates the grid are referred to as lines. These lines are numbered starting with 1 at the top left corner and move right to the column downwards. So yeah, I'm pretty sure you guys know how the grid works. They start from corner to corner to corner to corner. So there are 4 lines, and then in between there are 3 boxes. And then the grids count up. They use lines inside of the boxes. So like, boom, it creates a box. Oops, and that goes my alarm. Ha ha ha. So to control the amount of columns an item will consume, you can use the grid column property in conjunction with the line numbers you want the item to start and stop at. Here's an example: grid column 1/3. This will make the item start at the finished vertical line this will make the item start at the vertical. This will make the item start at the first vertical line of the grid and the left and span to the third line of the grid, consuming 2 columns. Make the item with the class item 5 consume the last 2 columns of the grid. I am kind of... So make the class item 5 consume the last 2 items of the grid. So class item 5, you want to give it the property of grid column, and then we want it to consume the last 2 columns of the grid. The last 2 columns, so it's gonna be 1, 2, right? Hold up. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Or 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we want it to consume. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not perfect. Right, the last 2 columns. So from 2 to 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2 to 4. So 2 to 4. Yes. Or that's a row. That is a row, my friends, right? So instead of that, so instead of 2, we want to, or it, wait. I'm confused now too. What? I'm very sorry. This will make the item start from the vertical line of the grid on the left and span to the third line. 2 to 4. So what happens if we go 2 to 3? 2 to 6? There is no 2 to 6, so 2 to 4, 2 to 4. But that's rows, is it not? What? Or column. Okay, either way, so it spans 2 columns. Okay. Now rows, let's do rows. So we want to do it for the last 2 rows. So grid row, let's peep it. So the rows, we want to have the last 2 rows, so I'm guessing these are the last 2 rows. Like that, maybe. So what, 2 and 4 again, 2, 2, 4. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so you can, the CSS grid, the content of each item is located in a box which is referred to as a cell. You can align the content's position with the cell horizontally using the justify self property on the grid item. By default, this property has the value of stretch, which will make the content fill the whole width of the cell. This CSS grid property accepts other values as well. Start, center, end. Use the justify self property to center the item with the class item 2. Item 2 class should have a justify self property that has the value of center. Okay, dokie, so we just want to justify self this item to the center. Justify self center. Right? Oh, just if I. So that brings everything in the center. Interesting. Align the item with the class item to the vertical and vertically at the end. So justify end, right? Justify self or align. This is saying align. To do this, you want to use the align self property. Align self. Alright, so remember, so justify self does everything vertically and align self is more horizontal. Align self end. So within the cell itself, so basically what I am getting at is, so we were just playing with item 3. So item 3 is a box itself. So inside the box we have like a number 3. So we just aligned it to the bottom of this cell, which was created by this. We created a grid. So this is a grid right now. So everything inside the grid will have its own little thing. Interesting. Because, hold up. If we change the background color to like, let's do it to like orange. Or like black. Alright, so yeah. And yeah. Okay, whatever. It's still understandable. So use this property to center all of our items horizontally. So inside the container property, we are going to justify items to the center. Cool. Align items property on the grid, vertical alignment. Use it now to move all the items to the end of each cell. So justify was to do the other one horizontally. Align items, and the other one was vertical. This is more horizontal. Okay. I'm so sorry, guys. Using align items on the grid container will set the vertical alignment. This is horizontal, no? Okay. Okay, so the code above merges the top 3 cells together. So grid, template, area, header, advert, content, footer. We're I feel like a grid is basically, so this is, alright, so the container has been there has been a grid created inside the container content. Everything inside the container is gonna be over here. Anything the container, okay, container is basically, okay. Loki, I'm kind of understanding the grid styles. So the code above merges the top 3 cells together into an area named header, the bottom 3 cells into a footer area, and makes the 2 areas in the middle row advert and content. Note, every word in the code represents a cell, and every pair of quotient marks represents a row. In addition to custom labels, you can use a period to designate an empty cell in the grid. Place the area template so the cell labeled advert becomes an empty cell. So this is going to be an empty cell. Cool. So after creating an areas template for your grid container as shown in the previous challenge, you can place an item in your custom area by referencing the name you gave it. To do this, you use the grid area property, an item like this. Item 1, grid area header. This lets the grid know that you want the item 1 class to go in the area named header. In this case, the item will use the entire top row because that whole row is named header. Place an element with the item 5 class in the footer area using the grid area property. So we are making, so item 5 gets a variable called grid area, and then we're giving it an attribute of footer. So then this whole thing will be in the footer because here we made it so the footer gets that. Interesting. So using the grid area property, place the elements with item 5 class between the third and the fourth horizontal line and between the first and Okay, so item 5. They said we want to create a grid area. Okay, so between the third and the fourth horizontal lines. So how it goes is horizontal line, vertical line, horizontal line N, and vertical line N. So 3 and 4 and 1 and 4. So 3, 1. So that's how it goes. So it's gonna start at the third line, and then the third horizontal line, and it wants us to end at the first vertical line, and then it wants us to start at the fourth horizontal line and end at the fourth horizontal line. Okay, so what we are doing here is it was here, so we grabbed it from the third horizontal line. Okay, so third horizontal line, make it start from here, then the fourth horizontal line, end it at here. Okay, something like that, right? Yes. Okay. I mean, as long as we understand it, right? And I can explain it, anything is good. If you believe in love after love after love. Depression. Alright, so let's check it out. Use repeat to remove repetition from grid template columns property. When you use grid template columns and grid template rows to define the structure of a grid, you're entering a value for each row or column you created. Let's say you want a grid with 100 rows of the same height. It is very practical to insert 100 values individually. Fortunately, there is a better way by using the repeat function to specify the number of times you want your column or row to be repeated, followed by a comma and the value you want to repeat. Here's an example that would create a 100 row grid, each row 50 pixels tall. You can also repeat multiple values with the repeat function and insert the function amongst other values when defining a grid structure. Here's what that looks like. Grid template. Wait, I'm so sorry. Here's an example that would create a 100 row grid, each row grid. So we repeat it and it'll go endlessly, and then we can repeat multiple values with the repeat function and insert the function amongst the value defining the grid, which translates to one fracture. Okay. So pretty much this one is saying how for the rows, it will keep repeating a row that's gonna be 100 rows. I mean 100. It's gonna pretty much create a 100 row grid that's gonna be 50 pixels tall. So it's gonna keep making rows that are 50 pixels tall, I'm pretty sure. And then this is gonna repeat. This is gonna repeat 2 columns that are gonna be 1 fraction and 20 pixels. It's gonna repeat it twice, and then at the end it's gonna make it so there's gonna be one that's not gonna be repeated. Right? So use the repeat to remove the repetition of grid column template. So for example, what we are going to do here is do repeat 3 1 fraction. So what would happen if we were to add another one of these? Okay. Interesting. So it will continually be that type of, it won't change. So Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, just a shorter way of writing it. That's pretty much what they're telling you. Oh, yeah, it is a pretty much a shorter way of. Yep, never mind. So use min-max function to replace one fraction in the repeat with a column size that has a minimum width of 90 pixels and the maximum width of one fraction, and resize the preview panel to see the effect. I'm so sorry. So use the min-max to replace. So you want me to make it so it's going to be min-max, right? And then replace one fraction in the repeat function with a column size that is minimal width of, so min-max of 90 pixels, and then a max of one fraction, and then resize it. Don't really understand that. Will it work? Cool. Interesting. Don't really understand it. Is it just because it makes it stretchy? Does it stretch it out? That's why? So the repeat function comes with an option called autofill. This allows you to automatically insert as many rows or columns of your desired size as possible depending on the size of the container. You can create flexible layouts when combining autofill with min-max like this. Repeat autofill min-max 60 pixels, one fraction. So when the container changes size, this setup keeps inserting 60 pixel columns and stretching them until it can insert another one. Note, if your container can't fit all your items on one row, it will move them down to a new one. In the first grid, use autofill with repeat to fill the grid with columns that have a minimum width of 60 pixels and a maximum of one fraction. Then resizing the preview to see autofill in action. Okie dokie. So grid template column. So in the first grid, use autofill. So property with repeat and autofill that will fill. So use autofill with repeat. So autofill. Autofill. And then 60 pixels. And then just do the min-max 60 pixels and one fraction. What's gonna happen? It doesn't work. Or does it? Did it work? Did it not work? I don't think it worked. Do I have to put like a 3? Nope. So inside the container, class should have a grid with repeat and autofill that will fill the grid that has a minimum of 6. Yeah. Autofill. Yeah, so it's still not working. I don't know. But like, it doesn't work. I don't feel like that is working. Or I mean, it still works. So in the second grade, use the autofill. So this is we did in the we did this in the container. Inside the container, we have item 1, item. Okay, and what? These are columns. we filled in the rows of the columns. Okay, I don't know. Continuing to I'm sorry, guys. Autofill works almost identically to autofill. Autofill, the only difference is that when the container size exceeds the size of all items combined, autofill keeps inserting empty rows or columns and pushes it to your item to the side of, while the other ones. No, if you can't fit all your items in one row, it will move them down to a new one. In the second grid, use autofit and repeat to fill the grid with columns that have a minimum width of 60 pixels. Alright, so in the second one, we want to do repeat auto fit. Okay. And I just want to test some things out real quick. So what? So it's gonna continually auto fitting everything just like that. And then what about this? Same thing. Oh, interesting. Okay, so when the viewport width is 400 pixels or more, make the header. Alright, so CSS grid can be an easy way to make your site more responsive by using media queries to rearrange grid areas, change the dimensions of the grid, and rearrange the placement of items. In the preview, when the viewport width is 300 pixels or more, the number of columns change from 1 to 2. The advertisement area when occupies the left column completely. When the viewport width is 400 pixels or more, make the header area occupy the top row completely, and the footer area occupy the bottom row completely. When the viewport is 400 pixels or more, the container class should have a grid template area. So change the code below. So okay, so turn the element with item 3 class into a grid with 2 columns with a, okay, so grid area content. Oh shit, guys, I'm sorry for yawning. Did it work? Then it should have display grid, right? Or no? Okay. Alright, so okay guys, so the next thing is going to be the introduction to responsive web design projects. So, looks like tomorrow we're going to be building our tribute page. Let's get it started. I'm so scared.